Hey everyone, today we're working on some acceleration and then I'm going to get into some upper body accessories. The main reason I'm doing this type of video is I know there's a bunch of people interested in running faster or training their clients to run faster, but they don't really get into it because they either have no idea how to put together a sprint workout or they're worried about embarrassing themselves with their form or something like that. So I just thought I'd talk about how I structure an acceleration session, why I do the drills that I'm doing, some things to look out for, some things to focus on. If you want to learn more about our system for strength and conditioning, of course, check out our GPP Level 1 course. That's linked down below. But let's get into our workout. So the way you want to divide up your sprint training, you want to have two main types of sessions. You want to have your acceleration sessions and then your more max velocity focused sessions. And when you're at the start of your sprinting journey, you definitely want to put a much greater emphasis on your acceleration. Because what you'll sort of notice is when you're starting people on their sprinting journey, a lot of people, they won't be able to accelerate for very long. So to give you an idea of what elite sprinters are doing, in a 100-meter race, for example, top sprinters will accelerate for 60 to 70 meters. Whereas some of your more unathletic clients who are just getting into this stuff, they're going to be accelerating for about 3 steps. So before we get into any of the technical components of working on your acceleration technique, I just want to go through a little bit of a warm-up, and I do the same sort of warm-up regardless of if I'm doing an acceleration session or a max velocity session. And that usually consists of some marching and some skipping drills, some locomotive plyometrics, and then we get straight into it. All right, so just starting out with some really slow marches. Some people will call this like a hip lock. Again, I don't think it's really important. You just want to start out with some slow alternating marching type patterns and then go through some skips or some dribbles. So again, nice slow marching, flexing one side of the body while you extend the other. And so it's a nice stretch out. All right, so once you've done a few slower sets of marching and that's starting to feel nice and greased up, then you just want to sort of start to bring a little bit of plyometric energy to them, and that's when it starts to evolve into something that would look a little bit more like a skip. So with these more skipping based drills, one of the things we're trying to work on is actually switching our limbs in the air. So not waiting for the other leg to touch down on the ground before we lift the other leg up. We actually want a moment where our body is fully in the air. So one of the other things that these drills really help us with as well is building some control of our posture when we're sprinting. So when you're sprinting, you need access to a lot of flexion and a lot of extension. And you'll notice that if your torso is in either a really extended position or a really flexed position, you'll be able to do a really good job of one of those and probably a really poor job of the other one. And this is why, like, when you're sprinting, we want a relatively neutral posture. So it's okay if you're a little bit extended or a little bit flexed, but if you're having trouble getting your legs out in front of the body or getting into a lot of hip extension, again, a large reason for that is probably the position of your torso. So when you're doing these marching or skipping drills to get yourself started, just try to think about having a nice long spine. All right, and then I like to get into some dribbles, so ankle dribbles specifically. I'm probably doing more of a mid-shin dribble, and what that's really trying to do is develop this cyclical action of our lower limb, because a big part of sprinting is gathering momentum before you even hit the ground. So one of the things that slow people struggle with is they wait till the ground hits them before they start to push, but you'll notice that faster people, they're really good at whipping their leg out in front of the body and creating what's known as negative foot speed. So the faster you go, the faster your limb needs to travel so that you can actually create this negative foot speed. But again, a lot of people who haven't done much sprinting, they're not that good at that. And this is a quality that really divides fast people from slow people. Just this ability to continue cycling the leg so that we can actually maintain negative foot speed, and that allows us to continue accelerating. As soon as you can no longer create that negative foot speed, again, you're kind of applying a lot more braking forces and slowing yourself down in between your steps. Whereas the quicker you can cycle that leg through, the more you can continue to accelerate for longer. It's like I said, this is something that's really hard to do at high velocities and at the full scale. So we just break it down into this smaller scale. So again, we've got ankle dribbles where you're just practicing stepping over your ankle and still trying to create that cyclical action. And then you have a mid-shin dribble where you're picking up the foot a little bit higher, and we've got a little bit bigger of a cycle. And then I think you've got a over the knee dribble, which you can do. And I don't really think it makes much of a difference if you're doing like an ankle or a mid-shin dribble. Again, we're just trying to develop that cycling action of the leg. The other thing that you'll notice is a little bit different about dribble technique versus actual sprinting technique is you make contact on the heel and then roll through the foot. And this is good technique when we're moving at lower velocities. All of a sudden, when you increase the velocity and you're actually sprinting, you'll be touching down on the ball of the foot. But don't stress about using the heel or making contact with your heel when you're dribbling. That's meant to happen, and it's just a natural byproduct of moving slower. So again, just to show you what it looks like in slow motion, again, stepping over the ankle, trying to maintain a bit of dorsiflexion in the air, so that way we then roll through the whole foot, picking up the other leg, pulling it over the ankle, again, staying dorsiflexed, and then rolling through the whole foot. And then we're just trying to pick up the pace there. So a lot of people find dribbles quite awkward. Another cue that a lot of people like to give is you just pretend you're riding a mini bike. You know, remember Homer Simpson riding the little bike through that loop? You're gonna try to be like him. Oh, sorry, it was Homer and Krusty who were doing that, wasn't it? One of the things that I think helped me a lot with my dribbles and also my running was just learning to relax my upper body a little bit more. If you've done a lot of strength training, it can just be very normal, like just carry a bit too much tension in your upper body. So I like to just shake my arms out and try to keep my arms nice and loose when I'm doing all my sprint work, because again, it just helps me cycle them even faster. If you really tense through the upper body, it is just going to slow things down. All right, now it's time for our locomotive plyo of the day. And usually when I'm warming up for acceleration, I'll typically do some form of bounding as my final warm up before I do my first reps of acceleration. And that's because they're pretty similar. One of the other things I do to make it a little bit more specific is I bound from a standing start, because again, it's just closer to mimicking the first couple of steps of acceleration, but it doesn't have to be that specific. It's not that serious. We're mainly just trying to scale things up into the acceleration. Like that's the whole pattern. We started out with really slow marching, increased the velocity a little bit with skipping and dribbling, and now we're just trying to go a little bit faster and harder with our locomotive plyos, and then we'll get into our first couple of accelerate. Don't think about the specifics so much, just think about the general pattern of just trying to build all these qualities up from the start of the session. For my actual accelerations today, I'm doing resisted acceleration and I'm working on my 0 to 5 meters. So I think that this is a really valuable distance for people to work on, whether you're a really experienced sprinter or especially if you're a more beginner sprinter. We develop about 70% of our velocity in those first 3 steps. So there's just so much to be gained for just really nailing early acceleration. And like I was mentioning at the start, a lot of people who aren't good at accelerating, you won't be able to accelerate for very long. So if you're working on 0 to 5, 0 to 10, you're ensuring that you're actually working on meaningful acceleration, even if you're a noob. Whereas those distances, you know, 20 to 40 meters, even up to 50 meters can be acceleration work, but only if you have a really high max velocity that requires a long build up and a long acceleration to actually reach. If you don't have a high max velocity, if you're not running over 8 meters a second, I'll be doing all your acceleration work under 20 meters. With even greater emphasis on, like I said, 0 to 5 meters and 0 to 10 meters. So one of the biggest things you need to understand between acceleration and then max velocity work is the emphasis on horizontal force production versus vertical force production. So acceleration, especially your early acceleration work, majority of our emphasis is going to be on producing force horizontally. So we want to see a lot of forward torso angles and positive shin angles. You want your shins as close to the ground as possible, especially in those first couple of steps. It just allows us the most efficient chance of that horizontal force production. Whereas once you're at max velocity, it's more this emphasis on vertical force production that creates that floating sensation and allows you to maintain all that momentum that you've built up. But gaining all that momentum, like I said, it's mostly emphasizing horizontal and pushing back behind you. And that's why I'm so bullish on resisted acceleration, because if you want positive torso angles and positive shin angles, having weight behind you that you can lean forward against, it just makes all of those things so much easier without even having to think about them. And don't stress, because if you don't have access to a sled to do resisted acceleration, you get the exact same qualities just by sprinting up a hill. And it doesn't need to be some ridiculous hill either. Even a gentle upward slope is really going to coax out these horizontal positions of leaning forward and positive shin angles. And if you are loading up your sprints, a general heuristic for resisted acceleration, we can kind of work with anything, you know, up to about 50% body weight. Obviously this is different for everyone, and it's also going to have a fair bit to do with the sort of surface that you're doing it on and how much friction your sled has, but that's sort of what I'm working with my sled and on this carpety type shit, and also when I'm on grass. I mean, honestly, the real test, you'll know you've loaded up too much weight on the sled when you're just not accelerating. If you've lost the ability to accelerate and actually build momentum step after step, then just reduce the weight on the sled. But as long as you're seeing increases in momentum after each stride, then it's probably not too heavy. All right, so you notice I'm getting into a 3-point start today, but if you don't feel comfortable doing that, you can start in a 2-point start, you can start in a 4-point start. Just sort of, main thing you want to do is just, like I said, get a positive torso angle and get a positive shin angle in your start position, so you've got a good position to push off for that first step. And I just feel like for me, a 3-point start, it makes it really, really easy to get the shin low and get my torso low. Right here is my start line, and then I don't know if you can see the chalk on camera, that's my 5-meter line. So just trying to cover this as fast as possible. I think it's about 5 steps probably. We'll see. All right, so I started out with 15 kilos. I move up to 25 kilos for my second set. And typically the way I structure the resisted acceleration is I will work up from quite a low resistance all the way up to, like I said, roughly 50% body weight, do a set or two there, and then start to pyramid back down. So increasing resistance all the way up to a peak, and then working my way back down. So those last couple of accelerations, almost unresisted. I might even do some completely unresisted ones just to finish off the session. But just for the athlete, it's a really nice experience sort of building that intensity up on the sled and then reducing it and just feeling that velocity increase on the way back down. It's amazing. One of the best things I've ever heard when it comes to acceleration training is from Jack Edwards, aka Metamorphosis Track Project, if you want to check him out on Instagram. And he says, the ground is your friend in acceleration. And so what he's sort of getting at here is the difference between early acceleration and then max velocity. In our early acceleration, we're spending 80% of our time on the ground. Like, don't get me wrong, we're still trying to be quick, but there's just not much time in the air because you don't have any momentum. So there's not much point spending time in the air. You want to get back down onto the ground and spend most of your time actually pushing. Versus once you're actually moving at pace, you know, it's almost inverted. We're spending all of a sudden 70 to 80% of the time in the air and just 20% of that time on the ground. Because again, we can actually take advantage of flying through the air. Like I said, max velocity is flying through the air, hammering that vertical force emphasis to just float through the air, maintain all that momentum. Acceleration, especially early acceleration, horizontal force production, trying to stay low, trying to get back on the ground so we can keep pushing and keep building that momentum stride after stride. And this is another reason why acceleration work is such a friendly place to start for people who have a large history of strength training. strength training just improves our ability to push into the ground, which is so useful. It actually transfers really well to acceleration, but not so much of max velocity. Max velocity is fish out of water territory for people who've done a lot of resistance training but haven't done as much sprinting or plyometric training. This is just another reason why I start with such an emphasis on acceleration work early on in the sprinting journey, because it bridges that gap. Again, I'm going to go back into another sort of Jack Edwards metaphor, talking about being an earth bender versus an air bender. Again, strength training just builds earth benders, people who are comfortable on the ground and really good at pushing into the ground, whereas to harness your max velocity ability, you need to get really proficient at knowing what to do with your body in the air and learning how to whip your body through the air quickly. And even though we're still spending a lot of time on the ground, in acceleration, we're still flirting with some of these qualities. Like, yeah, I'm spending most of my time on the ground, but I'm still trying to get a little bit of that cycling action going, a little bit of that in-air action. So, like I said, it's a nice sort of transition into working at higher speeds. Just, you know, being an absolute pig in the weight room, starting to do some acceleration, big emphasis on resisted acceleration, because again, it makes it feel more familiar, makes it feel more like strength training, and then over time, reducing the weight, increasing the distances, increasing the velocities, flirting more with that airbender style of athleticism. All right, so we're up to 35 kilos on the sled, but factoring in the sled weight and a bit of friction, we're kind of getting up towards I just weighed myself, I'm 82.5 kilos today, so we're getting up close to 50% of body weight. Might throw another 5 kilos on after this. We'll see how this rep feels anyway. I mean, that's felt like pretty good acceleration for my standards, so can definitely squeeze another 5 kilos on there. And so let me add to my recommendation when it comes to resistance on the sled. If you're dealing with someone who's really strong but hasn't done much sprinting, you can definitely push the weight on the sled and they'll probably produce better acceleration postures and overall technique. If you're dealing with a weak dog who's also never done much sprint training, maybe you'll only be able to get 20 or 30% on their body weight before things start to go to shit. So like I said, just trust your coach's instinct and just look at it and be like, is this person still accelerating? Okay, I can go a little bit heavier. Not that you have to, but you can. Don't just keep piling weight on the sled if you're dealing with someone who's not strong and not quick. Again, just 20, 30% of their body weight, probably do some good things. Honestly, if I wasn't making content, I probably wouldn't go any heavier than that after doing the second rep at 35 kilos, but let me add another 10 and we'll see how bad the acceleration gets. But just maybe for a good visual demonstration of what an overloaded resistance, a too heavy resisted sprint sort of looks like. I'll be impressed if I can actually accelerate each step with this. You know what, that was probably still fine, but I think I aroused myself a lot more before that set. Anyway, regardless, that's my top weight for today. Time to start slowly stripping the weight back. All right, so when you're trying to work out how many sets you should be doing, I mean, the main thing is that you get emphasizing quality over quantity. So if you find yourself getting breathless or tired, it's time to call it. I mean, that's probably more of a byproduct of not resting for long enough. You definitely shouldn't be getting breathless between your resisted acceleration work. I wouldn't be resting anything less than 2 to 3 minutes, but you can definitely go a little bit longer than that, especially when you're getting to some of your more intense sets. But yeah, with these shorter distance resisted accelerations, typically I'll get anywhere between 6, 8, up to even 10 to 12 if I'm really having a good day. Whereas at my level of fitness and conditioning with a max velocity session, I'm typically doing under 5 repetitions when I'm doing those longer sprints that are actually working on my max velocity. All right, down to 25 kilos of additional sled weight. Didn't do a good job of relaxing my arms there, but whatever. All right, 1 or 2 sets at 15 kilos, and then we get to experience unresisted bliss. If you want an insight into how we train every single physical quality here at General Physical Preparation, whether it be improving your sprint performance, getting bigger, faster, stronger, improving endurance, or doing all of those things concurrently, check out the GPP Level 1 course below. You get access to pre-recorded lectures that explain my entire training model. You also get access to me and the rest of the GPP Level 1 community through a Discord. We also have 3 one-hour live video calls each week where you can ask questions on applying the course content, or if you need help troubleshooting one of your clients' programs, or if you just need a rev up from the crew, we're here to support you. So check out the links for that down below. It's the best deal on education you're gonna get in the fitness industry. All right, that's it. We're done with the sled. Time for a couple of reps unresisted, and then we smash accessories. Okay. Oh, no resistance, no excuses for being slow. I can't emphasize how if you're a coach, you need to get comfortable with being shit at things, because I interact with so many coaches who are afraid to get started on their sprinting journey because they're afraid to be seen as being a beginner at something. But I mean, if you want to get good at something, you have to be a beginner at it. There's no way around it. Like, fair enough if you don't want to post the early days of your sprinting journey as content on social media, but you should be more embarrassed about the attitude that you don't want to be shit at something, because it just means, like I said, you're never going to master these things. Get in there. You know, you were shit at resistance training. How did you get good at that? If you want to get good at running, if you want to get good at coaching plyos, if you want to feel like a weapon when you're coaching your clients through the Olympic lifts, you got to train it yourself. Because yeah, like coaches make fun of me all the time. Oh, this guy's got 50,000 followers, really influential coach. Oh, what do you mean you can't run a sub 1200 meters? It's like, it is what the fuck it is. Like, I've helped people way more athletic than me because I just know a lot about training. But again, you gotta be in the trenches, get some skin in the game a little bit yourself. You can walk through that, mate. It's no stress at all. Yeah, there's just no way around it. Like, you shouldn't be ashamed of being shit at something. Like, don't let other coaches make fun of you for being slow or for being weak or for being uncoordinated. As long as you're having a crack and you're actually trying to get better, that's the whole fucking point, because how else are you gonna lead people through this journey? Again, you're just missing out on these opportunities if you're too much of a pussy to start. 1 or 2 more reps of that, and I'm calling it. You don't need to see me do accessories, just trust that I'm doing them. Body weight's going up. I'll see you next time.